Good evening, everybody. Welcome and Happy New Year. We're really excited to continue with our Harford Level Up series. You're in great hands this evening with SBDC. I love the new resolution attitude in January to be successful in our entrepreneur and small business efforts. So thanks again for your commitment. I'm Karen Holt. I'm with the Office of Economic Development, and we partner with the SBDC, the Randall Group, and Harford Chambers Young Professional and Entrepreneur Group, known as HYPE, to bring this series to you each month. We're really excited with the engagement. We've had over 200 participants register for these classes, so know that something comes up every month. There are different topics, but it gives you an opportunity to really build on your skills. So our next workshop will be February 10th, and that's going to focus on government contracting. All of these are on Eventbrite, so if you have information on this one, please go back and continue. They're all billed as Harford Level Up. And without further ado, I'm going to put you in the capable hands of Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Karen. All right, let's make sure we got everything all set up for us. Oh, thank you. Did not expect that. But good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Delgado. I'm a senior business consultant with the SBA programs, Small Business Development Center, and also the Veterans Business Outreach Center. So the SBDC, we're a no-cost organization that provides business consulting services back to Harford County entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs throughout the entire state of Maryland and the country. It's a nationwide program. So even if you ever decided to leave Harford County, which we hope you don't, we hope you start and grow your business here, you would be able to continue to find access to resources. And if you are a veteran, if you're a spouse, if you're active duty, I also have a contract with the Department of War of where we oversee 15 installations. So like next week, we'll be teaching at Dover Air Force Base. I often teach at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and I go through accounting, legal startup, et cetera, for other veterans that are transitioning out of service and want to pursue entrepreneurship. So tonight's session is structuring your business for success. So outside of academia and being with the SBA and being quote unquote government, I'm also an entrepreneur in the community as well. I have 2 restaurants in Cecil County, I have a music venue, and I have a lending company. So when it comes to SBA financing, USDA financing, I can help structure those loan packages and guide you throughout that process so that way you can access the capital that you need to get started. But tonight, we're covering legal considerations. And we also have Miss Brienne. She's a CPA, and she's going to be tag teaming the second half of this presentation to really go into the deep discussion of taxes and structure, and really to comment on things that I don't have the qualifications to comment on. So that brings me to just one disclaimer that I want to give is that I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a CPA. Okay, so anything that I discuss myself is not to be construed as legal advice or accounting advice, just a general overview. Right, and then you can meet with your CPA, you can meet with your attorney, you can meet with your consultant, and then we can start to do a deep dive into your individual case and look at your individual considerations, then help make those better decisions. So as mentioned, I'm a senior business and finance consultant. I've been with the program for about 12 years. I've helped open 350 small businesses, create 1,000 jobs, and raise about $100 million in capital just in Harford County. And then for my lending company, we're in 22 states, so we're working on about $250 million this year that we're going to get financed. I'm a board member of the Harford County Chamber of Commerce. I'm a professor of economics at Harford Community College. I've been one of the National 40 Under 40 Award winners and an SBA Instructor of the Year. So first things first, before we even get into legal considerations and accounting, it's about surrounding yourself with the right key resources. And the acronym that we like to use is to assemble your bail team. Right? Who's your banker, who's your accountant, who's your insurance agent, and who's your lawyer. You also need to have these people identified if you ever go into the lending process. So just by a show of hands, how many of you are considering starting a business this year? All right. How many of you are in business this year? All right, awesome. How many of you could always use more money for your business? Every hand went up there. Every hand. Right, so when you go throughout that process, yes, you need your banker, you need your accountant, you need your insurance agent. You're required to have a policy before you even go into closing on government guaranteed lending. And you need to select a lawyer to close the loan, right? You can't have the loan and get funded without your attorney either. So we're just gonna go through the basics of who these individuals are, then we're gonna go into the structuring. So what can your banker assist you with? Loans, lines of credit, establishing your business accounts, your checkings and your savings, credit card services, customer loans and payroll services. Then you have your accountant, Ms. Brienne. She can talk more about those services as well. But general accounting and taxes, strategic planning, payroll processing, and some advice on legal entities. I'm a big believer in establishing a relationship with your accountant throughout the entire year and just not at tax time. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Right, the preparation throughout the year is definitely valuable. Insurance agents, property, health, liability, workers' comp, directors and officers and liability, E&O insurance, errors and omissions and bonding. And then your lawyer, yes, they can help you file a legal entity. They can help you choose a legal entity. Granted, in today's presentation, I'm going to walk you through all the steps to file an LLC, how to be elected as an S-Corp. If you wanted to start a nonprofit, I'll guide you through on where to go. It's actually quite, I would say, simple. So it takes you all of 15 to 20 minutes online. Right? It's not as complicated as some resources out there claim it to be. We'll talk briefly on partnership agreements and operating agreements. Lawyers can also help with employee agreements, leases, and customer and supplier contracts. All right, so selecting a business structure for your company, right? So in order to do business, you should create a legal entity that represents the firm. Personally, I would never recommend to operate as a sole proprietor. Right? There's pros and cons to it. I personally wouldn't, because typically you're using your social security number. You're now operating as the business. Right? There's no distinction to protect you in case there was a liability issue. If there was a lawsuit, you're personally being named and not necessarily the company. And there's some caveats to that as well that we can get into in more in-depth discussions. But we're going to cover the multiple forms that you can choose from, and each has different tax implications, such as your taxation, your liability, and overall how you get paid. Welcome, guys. There's a couple seats open here, and there's more seats along here if we need some fillers. Welcome, everybody. We're just now kicking this off.
Thanks.
All right. We'll let everyone get seated real quick. Come on in, guys. All right, welcome, welcome. All right, so as we continue on, the types of business structures that we're going to talk about today. Your sole proprietorship or your partnership. All right, so just by a show of hands, how many of you are operating as a sole proprietor right now? All right, so there's a couple of you. Have you ever considered transitioning into an LLC? All right, yeah? All right. It's common. All right, so we're going to go through the details on sole props and partnerships. We're going to talk about the LLC and how to do that filing. We'll go into some examples of C Corps and S Corps and other legal entities. And again, before you make a decision, it's important to talk to your accountant or your lawyer. All right, so starting off, sole proprietorship. This is your most common form of legal entity in the United States. And does anyone want to take a guess as to why this is the most common form of entity? It's easy, but there's more people that are operating as a sole proprietor that don't even know they're in business. All right, so for example, think about your DoorDash delivery drivers, the Dashers, Uber drivers, someone that's a 1099 contractor, right? They're all technically forms of sole proprietors, even if they don't realize it. If your son or daughter is home from college and they're detailing cars on the side to earn extra income, and let's say they make an additional $600 that summer, they're technically in business, right? They're technically supposed to be filing additional taxes as being self-employed because now you're a sole proprietor. You don't legally have to register anything with the state of Maryland if you don't want to. It's optional if you want to submit a filing with the state. All right, so this is a self-assumed business entity. You're automatically considered to be a sole proprietor if you do business activities, even if you don't register as any kind of business. Again, self-assumed entity. That's terminology that we need to remember. Our advantages is the easiest and least expensive to form. How much does it cost to be a sole proprietor? Exactly, it's free, right? There's nothing that you technically need to pay or legally need to file to act as one. Generated income goes to owners to keep or to reinvest, right? Those profits are yours. There's not necessarily a distinction between you or a business at that stage. Your disadvantages, business assets and liabilities are not separated, right? You are the business, right? So that's where problems could happen. Let's just go back to that detailing cars example, right? Let's say you're wearing a watch and you accidentally scratch that customer's car, and now they want to sue you. Who are they suing?
You as the person.
You individually for those damages instead of your company and the potential insurance policies that you have in place to protect yourself, right? That's really where those issues could really start to come to light. Raising money can be difficult. I've been in government guaranteed lending for over a decade. I've never once issued an SBA or USDA loan to someone acting as a sole proprietor. right? There has to be a legal entity. Part of that closing checklist is asking for articles of organization, and it's asking for your employer identification number. All right, that's your EIN. That's a unique 9-digit code similar to a social security number, but used for your business, right? And just note, EINs are free to get. Keep that in mind. Typically, if you Google EIN application, for-profit companies that are advertising at the top of Google are going to try snatching about $150 from you to submit the application. If you go direct to the IRS, it takes 10 minutes. There's no cost to it. You can get it immediately and download it as a PDF. So banks often hesitate to lend to sole proprietors. Lack of continuity. If the owner becomes incapacitated or passes away, again, the business stops with you, okay? And it may be less attractive to prospective employees and also less attractive to prospective investors, right? They want to invest into a company, something that can eventually be sold. And your tax requirements is business profits and losses are reported on an individual tax return, Form 1040, okay? So your sole proprietorship, essentially any profits or losses are going to pass through your business per se and be reflected down to you personally. And then that's also going to touch into LLC, which we're going to talk about next. But one thing just to kind of give you some additional knowledge is that an LLC does not exist to the federal government, right? An LLC is a state entity. You're still being taxed as if you're a sole proprietor when you're a single member LLC. Right, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we continue talking, and then we'll go into some more details. So our partnerships. This is a business that is owned by 2 or more individuals who share profits and liabilities of the business. Does anyone here have a business partner or considering partnering with somebody? Everybody? All single member LLCs? All right, you might be making the easier decisions. All right, so you're going into a partnership? Got it. All right, so if there are 2 or more people that are going to share profits from the business, even if there's not a legal filing with the state of Maryland, you're still considered a partnership, okay? So you're going to break that down. Each person's still going to receive a separate K-1 on their tax returns. I'm sure Ms. Brian will talk more about what K-1s are, all right? But that's where if you're a 50-50 partnership, 50% of the profits are going to you, 50% is going to you, and that's going to be outlined on your tax returns. So your advantages. It's the simplest structure for 2 or more people to own a business together. Personally, I would go into an LLC, something along those lines, set up an operating agreement, a partnership agreement, so that way you start to have a structure around you. You have shared financial commitment and potential partnership incentives for future employees. Your disadvantages is you have joint and individual liability, and shared profits and decision-making may lead to disagreements. Going into a partnership is like going into a marriage, right? You're not always going to agree. You may have different ways that you want to raise your kids, as in there's a different way that you want to grow your business, right? And how are we going to make those decisions? So even if you go into a partnership or if you go into a limited liability company partnership, even if it's with a spouse, I still always recommend a partnership agreement, operating agreement, and set that up as if you're strangers, right? As if you're just meeting, right? Marriage is a piece of paper. Operating agreements are a piece of paper. Things like that can be broken. You want to make sure everyone's protected on either side of the coin. Tax requirements. The partnership itself is not subject to income tax. Profits and losses also flow through to their individual partners who report their share of the partnership's income on the personal tax returns. Now the LLC, right? This is what 99% of my clients file as. They're going in as an LLC, and then maybe they're going to elect to be taxed as an S Corp later on down the road, and I'll talk about maybe why you would consider doing that. But this is a hybrid business structure, right? It provides the limited liability features of a corporation and the tax efficiencies and operational flexibility of a sole proprietorship or a partnership. All right, so yes, I know most of you kept your hands down when I asked if you were going to partner with somebody. So if it is just you and you go to file an LLC, it is called a single member LLC. That means it's just you. Member also equals owner, right? You are the owner of that company. Your advantages is it protects you from personal liability in most instances. Now, there's a lot of caveats to that, okay? One big one is I've had clients that have been in business for 10 years. They schedule a consultation with me. I say, okay, do you have a separate business bank account? Well, no, I've always ran it through my personals. That is one of the first major red flags that I can see. There's a lot of different distinctions and considerations to go into that. You know, for an example, I've had clients over the years that have paid their personal mortgages from their business accounts, right? They're not taking the money themselves individually, paying taxes on it as income, and then paying their mortgage. So now potential arguments could come into play. Well, now who owns the house? If the money is coming out of the business account, does the business own the property? And that's called piercing the corporate veil. Okay, so even though we talk about liability protection, we talk about the distinctions between personal and business, just note that if you fudge the books, you start messing up the numbers, and I'm sure Ms. Brienne can attest to this as well, that's where issues arise, and you may not always be protected. Right? You need that bail team, you need that guidance to ensure we are doing it correctly, and you're actually maximizing the protection that you're trying to get from the very beginning by making these decisions. So personal assets, like your vehicle, house, and savings accounts, won't be at risk in case your LLC faces bankruptcy or lawsuits. Again, there's caveats to it. You got to be managing your financials correctly to actually get that level of protection. It lets you take advantage of the benefits of both the corporation and the sole prop or partnership business structure. And your disadvantages, it may require more paperwork than the sole proprietorship or the partnership. But I promise, at least in my experience, it's worth it. Right? All of my companies are LLCs. I have 3 companies. 2 of them are also taxed as S-corps. The other one is taxed as a sole proprietorship. You must file with your state, pay fees, and company information does become public. All right, so later on throughout this presentation, I'm going to go through the steps of actually how to file your LLC. I'll answer any questions that you may have during that process. But just note, for the average person, it costs about $196 to file the LLC. Okay, so that's the state fee, that's the rush processing fee that they nearly require, and then paying $20 for your certificate of good standing is right about $196. If you were to go through, say, I know I'm being recorded, so I'm not going to mention any certain websites or anywhere, but a lot of websites may charge you $500 to $750 for the same exact thing that you can do within 15 to 20 minutes yourself for under $200. Certain firms out there may charge you $2,500 to $5,000 to do the same filing, right? Go through it yourself, ask questions. SBDC is a free resource to help guide you through it if you have any concerns or hiccups during that filing process. And just note that if your application's ever denied, they're going to tell you why, and you can go back in and fix it, okay? But I promise it is quite simple to complete it. Tax requirements. It's the default form of taxation for single owner, same as for sole proprietorship. That's the part that confuses people. Right, so that's why I mentioned in the beginning that an LLC is a state entity. An LLC does not exist to the federal government. Right, so you're still being taxed as a sole proprietor. Right, all of your profit, your losses is flowing from the business's profit and loss statement and essentially over to your personal tax return. Right, so we'll just make an example. Let's say you earn $50,000 a year at your W-2 full-time job, and you earn an additional $25,000 in profit from your LLC. That $25,000 is going to pass through as self-employment income, right? Federal state taxes may not have been withheld on your new tax bracket, right, of earning $75,000. Now, she'll be able to go into the details of how that actually works and how that's going to benefit you, how it might be. Maybe we need to look into some tax benefits to go through to reduce that taxable income, but there's a lot of advantages that you can take from that. And then you have your C Corp. So in all my years of doing this, I personally have not had a client file as a C Corp. Okay, so I'll briefly touch on this one. A corporation is a legal entity that is separate from its owners. Corporations can make a profit, be taxed, and can be held legally liable. The advantages: it offers the strongest protection to its owners from personal liability. Easier to raise capital through the sale of stock, which can also be a benefit to attracting employees. Your disadvantages: you must file with your state, pay fees, and company information becomes public. Requires more extensive record keeping, operational processes and reporting, and double taxation. For tax requirements, it's subject to corporate income tax on profits at the corporate level, Shareholders are then taxed on any dividends received from the corporation at their individual tax rate. The one thing I want to mention under disadvantages, where it says your information becomes public, I should have relayed heavier into that under LLC as well. So just note that if you do register your company with the state, that your information does become public, okay? There's a website called Maryland Made Easy Business Express, and there's a couple chairs up here if you want to join us. So through Business Express, anyone has access to that public database. We can search any business name in the state of Maryland. We'll find out who owns it and where is that business registered. So if you're using your home address, your personal address, that can become public. If you want to get rid of that, that's where you can hire a registered agent. It's also known as a resident agent. Sometimes people use those words interchangeably, but that's where your legal paperwork can essentially be sent to. If you get mail, it can go to that address. If you ever got sued, it can go to those addresses. And then the people that work within that office will scan your mail and email it to you, and then ask if you need the physical copies, and they'll forward it to you if necessary. But that's where you can avoid your personal information from being public. Same thing if you're a home-based business, you also have the option to choose that on Google when you're registering your page. You know how we search on Google, we see businesses pop up, right? If you're a home-based business, you have the option to select that, so that way your address isn't public. So do you have a question?
Can you make that a PO box?
I don't believe the state of Maryland allows you to use a PO box to register the business. I don't believe they do, because you would need, you're agreeing? Yeah. Yeah, it does not.
You can use one of the Post Plus places or something like that, but they don't want to see a United States Post Office PO box.
Yeah, that can become difficult, and that's where I've actually had like clients in Cecil County and the Rising Sun community. Some of the homes in downtown Rising Sun don't have mailboxes. They all use PO boxes. So it actually runs into some issues of where people now need at least a location or they need a registered agent to essentially complete their filing. Good question. All right, S corporation. You'll probably see this phrase thrown out there quite a bit as you begin your business journey. If you are on TikTok, Instagram, you watch reels on business or investing, you're going to see a lot of people talk about the benefits of an S Corp. I would say the biggest thing to remember is that an S Corp is not a legal entity. It's a tax designation, right? I would say that's one of the more confusing things that people get caught up in. They're thinking they're registering their business as an S Corp when that's not necessarily true. You would be filing as an LLC. There's a form that you file then with the IRS, and you can check the box to be elected as an S Corp. I personally find it to be the most beneficial to file as an S Corp of when your business is producing a decent amount of money that's consistent, and let's say on average you're profiting about $60,000 to $70,000 a year. One of the requirements of being an S Corp is that you as the owner, you now become a W-2 employee, and you take your own paycheck. So you as the owner, you have to receive a reasonable salary. The average income in the United States is about $55,000 a year. Hence why I give about $70,000 of profit as an example, so that way you could take your $50,000 W-2 income, that $20,000 is now not subject to self-employment tax. So that additional $20,000, you're only now subject to federal and state income taxes of when that passes through. So you can essentially now save about 15.3% on your business profits when you register now as an S Corp. So we'll go into the advantages and disadvantages of this. So again, an S Corp is a tax designation rather than an actual business entity. Businesses cannot be incorporated as an S Corp. Electing S Corp status requires filing a form with the IRS, like when you're already an LLC. Yes, sir.
If you set up your LLC as a single member, can you change to an S Corp?
Absolutely. Yep, and you can do that pretty much at any time. Yep. Yes, sir. Good question. All right, advantages. Allows business owners the advantages of a corporation without the double taxation that comes with running a traditional C Corp. LLCs can save 15.3% on taxes on a percentage of their profits. Again, essentially whatever is left over after you already took your W-2 salary, other bills are paid, expenses are paid, what's that bottom line profit? That's where you're saving 15.3% on, okay? And as you grow your business, that can be a substantial amount of money, right? If you're looking to get that tax savings and benefits. Your disadvantages is all shareholders must be individual U.S. citizens or permanent legal residents. Prohibited preferential distributions may discourage investors. And for tax requirements, S-corps are pass-through entities for tax purposes. The corporation itself does not pay income tax. And that's where a lot of times you'll hear on the news, and we know the news is biased either which way you want to look at it, but when they talk about corporations not necessarily paying taxes, or this place didn't pay taxes, this person didn't pay taxes, it's in the IRS code for them not to. Again, I look at it as these tax codes were written for entrepreneurs to take advantage of, because we're now the ones hiring the W-2 employees that'll be paying taxes. All right, so these things are written for you to take advantage of, and it's vital to have a great CPA to walk you through those benefits and how to truly utilize it. So instead of profits and losses pass through to the individual shareholders who report them on their personal tax returns. And again, it's important to talk to your accountant. And these are just some other legal entities that are available for you to choose. However, again, I've worked with nonprofits, but I've never had anyone file as a B Corp. So that's your benefit corporation. So that's why these slides are a lot smaller than the others. So B corporations are available in some states for corporations with a beneficial or social mission. Through the SBA, I've asked people throughout my network, have you ever worked with a B corporation? I had one consultant tell me he has, and they ended up changing from a B corporation to just a standard LLC because they could not get funding as a B Corp. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to, but the rationale that the banker had in that situation is, well, you're putting the benefit more than profit, and we care about profit, and you repaying back that loan. So they actually didn't give them the financing that they needed. Then you have your nonprofit corporation. This is organized for charitable, educational, religious, literary, or scientific work. Nonprofits can receive tax-exempt status, meaning they don't pay state or federal income tax. So up until 2013, there was a very large organization that was the largest nonprofit in the world. And then the IRS forced them to change their tax designation. Does anyone want to take a guess as to who that was? Kelly? The NFL. The National Football League was registered as a nonprofit up until 2013. You guys know who the NFL is, right? Yeah, they were the largest nonprofit. But think about that. Now, I know this isn't a nonprofit, for-profit discussion for us tonight, but if you do launch a nonprofit, don't rely solely on grants, all right? That's usually the biggest mistake that I see. I'm also a certified grant writer. I work with a lot of nonprofits, but look at the NFL as that example. How many revenue streams do they have? Ticket sales, right? Ticket sales, merch, streaming, food, beverages, etc. Parking, the list goes on, and look at the salaries of what some of those people were getting paid, right? It doesn't mean that you can't make money in a nonprofit, but a nonprofit is still a business. It's just, it changes based on how you're taxed at the end of the year. So if you get a grant, it's a bonus, but don't rely upon that to fund you year after year because you may not get it. Family LLCs and LLPs. This is kind of like what the Walmart family uses. Right? They'll use a family LLC. This is used by families to conduct business operations with ownership among legally related individuals, assist in protecting assets, sharing income, and estate planning. And then you have your limited liability partnership. It's an advanced entity often used for specific types of businesses. And just note, I know that can cause a little bit of confusion. Just remember that even if you file as a single member LLC and you go in and you write a partnership agreement, you write an operating agreement, it now becomes a partnership, okay? That contract is what's going to set it up. So like for an example, if I'm working on a loan and part of that closing checklist is like, okay, this is a husband and wife team, they're gonna share 50-50 equity in the business, they still have to create an operating agreement, right? I would recommend to go through a lawyer and actually have a lawyer create it, have them review it, and then you submit it, rather than using ChatGPT. Okay, I would say a lot of people will use ChatGPT to write their operating agreements, and the banks will accept it, okay, because it is an operating agreement. But is it really going to protect you if something were to go wrong? Maybe, maybe not. That'd be one thing to consider investing in, at least to ensure it's reviewed. And just one little tip and trick that I've learned over the years, it's been cheaper to have an attorney review a document for me and provide feedback than it is for them to write it from scratch. Okay, so even if you had a baseline one, especially if they're charging by the hour, you may be able to save some money by simply having them review it instead of write it from the very beginning. So this slide can be available to you. If anyone wants a copy of this, I'm happy to email it over to you. Just get my email. Or if anyone wanted to take a photo of the screen, I was going to say this is the one to do it, because it just kind of quickly summarizes all the various entities that we've went through already. So just as a recap, we've talked about sole proprietors. Again, they're the most popular form of legal entity in the U.S. because millions don't realize that they're acting as a sole proprietorship. Partnerships. It's just like a sole proprietorship, but with another individual. We talked about your LLC, right? Your limited liability company. This is how all of my companies are formed. 99% of clients that I work with decide to file as an LLC, or they want to file as an LLC. We discussed C corporations. I personally have never had a client file as one. That does not mean that you shouldn't. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider it, right? You need to talk to your lawyer and accountant. But again, just based on my experience, I have not worked with one. S corporation is a tax designation, not a legal entity. 2 out of my 3 LLCs were elected to be taxed as S corps, just to save, again, that 15.3% on our distributions. You do have benefit corporations, and you have nonprofit corporations. So entities in summary, right, there is no one magical entity that works for everyone. Yes, the LLC is the most common, but each of us are different, right? We have different income levels, we have different educational levels, we have different levels of assets that we want to protect, we have different industries that we want to get into. Some may be high risk, some may be low risk. These are all different things to take into consideration. Does a trust own your LLC? Right? That's a whole other conversation and a different topic that you should be considering and starting to learn about as you're growing your business, okay? Like if you're concerned about privacy, Wyoming LLCs probably have the tightest privacy rights for the owners, right? So there's all these different things to consider, right? And Maryland LLC may not be the right one for you. There could be benefits to Wyoming. There could be benefits to Delaware. Consider what those options are and get the best information up front. So the important thing is to consider the operational, the legal, and the tax aspects of each structure as they apply to your unique situation. And again, don't make this choice lightly. Yes, it is possible to change forms if need be, although it can sometimes be expensive. And really where I see people, and I know we had like 2 folks raise their hands that you were starting as a sole proprietor, and that's totally fine. I'm not knocking it at all. But the conversation that I see a lot with clients is, hey Ryan, we're going to start out as a sole proprietor because we're just concerned about taking that next step of being an LLC. It seems a little too serious for me, right? That's usually how the conversation goes. And then they'll operate for years, and maybe they had an EIN number as well as a sole proprietor, and they have vendor accounts, and they have relationships established, and they have contracts set up with other companies, and maybe they're hiring some 1099s to work under them. And now the time comes of, you know what, it's time for me to get an LLC. Well, now you also need a new EIN number because the names need to match. And now you got to go back through, update all your legal agreements, update your bank accounts, change this, change that, and that's where it can start to get expensive. So again, my personal advice is if you're going to go as an LLC or if you're considering filing as an LLC in the future, why not just start now? Again, it's under $200 to submit the filing. And one thing to note though is that Maryland is an expensive state. Each year, you need to renew your LLC. You have to, that's the face I make every year when I got to submit that $300, right? It is $300 a year to keep your LLC in good standing. You need that to close loans. You need it for taxes. Some vendors and wholesalers can cancel your accounts if you're not in good standing, right? It's $300 a year to keep that active. Question?
Yeah, you mentioned it was, I think, 196, but that.
Approximately.
But that's for expedited, right? How long does it take to transfer from sole proprietorship to LLC, just regular time frame?
I would say on average 3 to 4 weeks when you pay that $196. If you want to pay an extra $425, you can get it within 48 hours. I had a client actually do that. I had a meeting yesterday. Turns out he paid almost $600 in total to file his LLC, and he got the approval today, so that way he could bid on a contract. So it was interesting as to why he chose that. But yeah, I'll say 196 is the average. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks. And that's kind of going to get us into our next slide here. So this is the registration steps, okay? I'm going to try going through these in detail. And I know I can talk fast because I don't have a whole lot of time to be up here. So I want to make sure too that if you have any questions about this, let me know. I'm going to do my best to answer them, okay? So first, we need to start with the state of Maryland. And we need to make sure that your name's available, okay? You can't have duplicated names in the state. So there is a website called Maryland Made Easy. And if anyone's taking notes here and you want to file an LLC tonight, this is where you need to go. Maryland Made Easy Business Express, okay? You're going to see a big red box that says register your business, and like these couple squares are going to come up. There's a square that says search. That's your business entity search. You can search any name. So if you're considering a business name, search it. And if it says no results found, that means that name's available in the state of Maryland, okay? Then you can proceed on to step 2, and that's creating your account on Business Express. Sometimes creating the account takes longer than actually filing the LLC. All right, get that. So you'll enter your name, your address, your contact information, your account's created. You're going to go in and you're going to select new business filing. All right, you're going to see a drop-down option. Do you want to file as a limited liability company? Do you want to register as a sole proprietor? Do you want to register as a corporation? A non-stock corporation, which is where you end up getting your nonprofit status from, right? You choose it. So let's just assume you're choosing LLC. All right, you'll select that option. I would recommend to do the electronic filing and just continue on with the next steps, okay? You're going to put in your name, your business name, your contact information, your home address, what's your business address? And yes, that can be your home, okay? Who's the registered agent? This is where I get a lot of questions from people as they're in the middle of that process. So you can't make your business the registered agent, okay? You cannot, but there is an option to select individual. So you would want to select individual. And now you, as a person, you can now be your own registered agent, all right? So that way you don't have to pay another company to do that for you, right? So you'll become your own registered agent. You'll continue on with the steps. It's maybe 3 pages worth, 15, 20 minutes of information. You're going to get to the end. It's going to have a pop-up that asks you if you need to establish any tax accounts. How many of you are considering selling product in your business? All right, if you're considering selling product, yes, you will need to establish a tax account. But I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Hit no at that immediate time when it asks if you need to establish them. And the reason why, it's going to take you to that application, but you need your EIN number. All right, you're not going to have your EIN number yet, and you shouldn't have your EIN number until your LLC actually gets approved, and I'll explain why in a moment. So when that pop-up comes up, just hit no to establishing tax accounts, and then you're going to proceed with payment. All right, you'll get to choose your options. You know, do I want to rush this? Do I want to expedite it? Do I want to pay a boatload of money and get it the next day? Again, if you're the average person, you'll be waiting about 3 to 4 weeks. All right, when you get that confirmation email that your LLC has been approved with the state of Maryland, that's when I recommend to then go to the IRS website and to get your EIN number, okay? It's at irs.gov. And the reason why I recommend waiting to get your EIN number is because when you submit that application, it needs to match exactly with what is on file with the state for your business name, okay? And some people jump the gun, and they'll go in and they'll do their business filing, they immediately go get their EIN number, and then they find out their LLC was denied for whatever reason, or maybe they rushed it and they spelt the name wrong, and now it doesn't match. Now you gotta do the whole process again, all right? So just be patient. Wait for the LLC to get approved, then go in and get your EIN number. And just a fun fact is that although the IRS EIN application is online, they still have business hours, okay? So I think they stopped taking applications around 7 p.m., something like that, even though it's all digital. All right, so just keep that in mind. You got to do it during normal business hours, and you'll get your EIN instantly, okay? It's called the SS4 form. You can download it as a PDF. Keep that as like it's your social security number, okay? Save it in your phone, print copies out, put it in a safe, email it to yourself. Everyone needs your EIN, all right? And if you're doing a loan and you're going after government guaranteed lending and you don't have the actual form from the IRS and you only have the number, that causes a problem. That can cause a major problem if you don't have the original form, all right? Keep multiple copies all around. It's like losing your social security card, right? You don't want to do that. Yes?
For the sole proprietor, if I already have my EIN number,
Mm-hmm.
so if, for two more questions, if I do go for a search and my name is already established, can I still use the same name?
So it depends. Did you register your sole proprietor with the state, or are you operating as a self-assumed entity? Did you actually submit a filing?
Like you can look me up.
Yeah, so if your name pops up, your EIN, though, it's going to be tied probably to your individual name unless you registered a trade name. So then in theory, just in general consensus, without diving into it, you would more than likely need a new EIN number to match the new business name because it's got to match on the paperwork.
Okay, but if the name does exist, like registered as an actual business, then if I do a search, it exists already.
I would say let me look into it, just so I have the details and the specifics to know correctly. So I don't want to tell you something wrong when I'm assuming. Yes, I saw his hand up first, then we'll jump to you.
If you register, let's say Maryland and Delaware, since we're that close, if you register your LLC in Delaware, can you still do business in Maryland, and do you have to pay that annual?
So I'm going to let the CPA go into that because I'm sure she has some insight on it. And she's going to talk next after me, so we'll be able to get into that. But if you have a Delaware company, you can operate in Maryland, but you also need to register as a foreign entity. So Maryland's going to put more fees on you for doing business here, but you didn't register here. They're kind of penalizing you for doing it in a way. But there's pros and cons all to it that I'm sure she'll be able to touch on further. Did you have your hand up as well?
When I was younger, I had set up an LLC because I was intending on setting up a farm business.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in to try and set up a LLC for my bridal shop, but it says that because I've already taken that free one, so to speak, does that mean that I just need to, like, that has a totally separate name, and it's not anything I would be using for what I'm doing now? So is that something where I just need to apply for a second EIN? Is that possible?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, if you had an LLC already that you're not using, you can go in and submit for a new LLC and have a separate one, and then you'll get a new EIN for that one.
Okay.
That would be the way that I would do it. So just kind of keep in mind too, and not saying that you did this, but some people may have filed an LLC years ago, completely forgotten about it, and now that LLC is in bad standing with the state, and guess what you've occurred? That $300 annually that you never paid. That can come up again to haunt you. All right, I've seen it, because you made an obligation with the state and you haven't paid your dues. And we know the state wants their money. All right, so just make sure you're staying up to date on it. If you're not going to operate your LLC anymore, cancel it. Okay, you can cancel your LLC and get rid of it, but don't just leave it out there, because you could be racking up penalties that just may come due one day. So getting into state registrations, so like I had mentioned, if you're selling product, and just to show of hands again, who's selling product? All right, so it's about half the room. All right, so once you have your LLC approved, you have your EIN number, you log back into Business Express. There's a drop-down option that says register tax accounts, okay? There's gonna be an application called a combined registration application. It's abbreviated CRA. Within that CRA, you can file a sales and tax use license. All right, so that's where if you're selling product and that product is taxable, you need your sales and tax use license. All right, because let's say if I'm selling you, what's your name?
Ryan.
Ryan? Oh, good name. My name's Ryan too. All right, so let's say I'm selling Mr. Ryan a product for $1, but we're in the state, so I'm going to charge you $1.06. That 6 cents is not mine, okay? That is the state of Maryland's. I am obligated to pay that back to them. It could be on a monthly or a quarterly basis. But when you have the sales and tax use license, that's what allows you to collect it. It's going to give you the instructions to set up your payments on Maryland Tax Connect, I believe it is, and that's where you're going to remit your sales tax payments. Okay? So that's where that starts to happen. Now, if you're in Harford County, you may need a business license on a county level. So if you're selling product, you need one called a trader's license. And that's based on inventory level. And I would say on average, if you're holding between $0 to $1,000 in inventory, it may range around 20 bucks, maybe a little bit less. And there's other levels of business license based upon the type of business that you're doing. Okay? And you would get that from the local clerk's office. That's on Bel Air Main Street. You can go there online, you can call, you can visit in person, and they'll help administer your local business license. All right, so just to kind of recap this, Maryland Business Express, you submit your paperwork for the LLC and you remit your payment of approximately $196. If you do not make your payment, they did not get your application. Okay, I've had folks go all the way through the end, assume that they did it, never pay, and then wait months. They're like, I never got my approval. I'm like, let's set up a Zoom real quick, log into your account and screen share. I'm like, oh, that's the problem. You owe them 200 bucks. They didn't do anything, right? Make sure you pay it. Wait 3 to 4 weeks, get the approval, then apply for your EIN number. Again, that is free to get. Don't let anyone charge you for an EIN, all right? They're free. After you have that, you can now establish your tax accounts back through Business Express, go to the clerk's office, get your local business license. Right? Note that there may be other state licenses required contingent upon the type of business that you're in. Right? So let's say you're opening up a salon or a dog grooming business, or you're going to start building houses and now you need an MHIC. The state of Maryland may require state licensings for those type of industries. Okay? There is a website called Maryland One Stop, O-N-E, One Stop, and you can search your industry on there, and it's going to populate of whether there's any state licenses required, right? And that's where you may need to go through that process as well, but it's really contingent upon the industry, right? Not every industry requires a license. If you're doing work like consulting type work, all you need is an LLC and an EIN number, right? Because like when I do consulting through my one firm, I'm not charging any sales tax because I'm not selling any product, and I don't need any licenses to do it. It's really based on your education and experience, right? So some people's filings are super simple. Other people's filings could be a bit more robust. And also contingent on the industry. If you're doing anything food and beverage, make sure you consult with the health department because there's certain permits, inspections, occupancy permits that you may need of planning and zoning too. Okay, so if anyone has any questions about that, I mentioned in the beginning, I'm in the restaurant business as well. So if you need to navigate the health department, just let me know. I'll help you work through it. But any questions on the steps to register your companies? Any questions on this? Yes, sir.
I have a question. If you start a business and basically you're selling clothes to your friends or family, or you want to sell clothes online, do you absolutely need an LLC at your end?
If you want to sell clothes online?
Yeah.
Do you technically need the LLC? No. Should you have it, I would recommend it. Okay, but you don't technically need it to sell online. But you would need to have the sales and tax use license if you're selling to Maryland residents, and that becomes a whole other topic. So there's a word I'm going to recommend you look into, and it's called Nexus, N-E-X-U-S. Ms. Brianne, I don't know if you can talk about Nexus at all. Nexus is a fairly complicated topic for when you're selling product online, contingent upon like where the buyers are, where you may have offices at or warehouses at, et cetera. Years ago, I was in a retail business based in Maryland, but I had a warehouse in North Carolina and I had a warehouse in Las Vegas, Nevada. So whenever someone would order a product online from Maryland, from North Carolina, or from Nevada, I had to charge them sales tax because we had Nexus there, because we had warehouses. All right, so that's a whole other subject for when you're selling online. Any other questions on this? Do you have one? Yes, sir.
So I'm going to be starting probably an LLC. On the side, I was looking to doing like just like contracting work, like developing, you know, a little bit extra income. Should I register myself at all for that or no?
So talk to me about the developing work, like the development work. What do you mean by that?
I should probably elaborate, huh? So I'm looking to help like small video game companies
Mhm.
implement like botting capabilities. So
Mhm.
there can be user-generated content.
Are those companies going to hire you or your company to come in and support them? So like a contractor?
Yes.
Okay. So if you were to set up yourself as like a 1099 where you're going to be a 1099 for them, you could do it individually or you could do it through an LLC. I can't necessarily tell you which way to go because I don't have your personal details,
Yeah.
but if it were me, I would be establishing the LLC. And that way you can run it through your business because in my opinion, there's a lot more tax advantages that you can begin to take that way.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, from buying vehicles, home offices, be able to write all that off. Any other questions on this? All right, so just to kind of wrap this up, then we're going to pause for a moment. Then Miss Brienne, she's a CPA, she's going to get into the details of this. So after registering your business and your EIN, make sure you stop at your local bank, credit union, establish that bank account. Okay, it doesn't necessarily cost you to open up a business bank account, but just note that some banks may require you to put in X amount of dollars to get started. Often I would say it's about $50 of what they want you to just to have in there to open up the bank account. And also note for commercial accounts that they may want you to have a minimum for them not to charge you maintenance fees. Okay, I'm not saying that's every bank, but some banks that I've had accounts with, I believe it's on business savings accounts. It was a $500 threshold to where they don't charge you monthly. And then for business checkings, it was about $1,000, okay, to where they may not charge you the monthly fees. But have your business bank account set up. Don't use your personals, right? Make sure everything is separated. So again, keep your personal and business matters separate to protect both your legal liability as well as protect you from IRS or state tax audits. Pay from the appropriate accounts. Remember that mortgage example that I gave a few minutes ago? Right? Pay your personal bills with personal money. Pay your business bills with business money. Keep it separated. When you go to the bank and you open up a bank account, if they offer you a debit card, take it, okay? If you have money in that bank account, start using that debit card so that way you know it's all direct business expenses. And if you don't have the funds to pay for QuickBooks or a bookkeeper at the moment, you can now track it on your bank statements, okay? And you can start keeping track of your own books until you get to that level, right? Just little tips and tricks like that can save you thousands. And then lastly, any business expenses you use personal funds for should be well documented, right? So anytime I'm out driving, if I have to pay for fuel, I'm using my business credit card. If I ever forget that one day and I use my personal, I'm writing a quick memo, saving it to myself and emailing it to myself and putting it in my tax file so that way everything is documented throughout this process. All right, so again, this is a lot of information to absorb. Does anyone have any questions before I wrap up my part? We'll go to you, then we'll go to you. Yes, ma'am.
Just real quick, like when you're getting started, right? Like I don't have any income from the business yet. I
Mhm.
don't have a loan. But things like getting your LLC, things like that you're paying for out of private money,
Yeah.
right, personally. So if I have all that documented, once I do start bringing in money, should I pay myself that money back
You can.
out of the business?
You-
Or how does,
You,
what
you,
would be
you,
best for
you
that?
can, and I would actually go to Miss Brienne to talk on that a little bit further when she comes up here, but you can essentially issue a loan from yourself personally to your business. It's now reflected on your balance sheet, and then your business can pay you back,
Got it, okay.
okay? But we just make sure it's all documented. Yes, sir.
Two comments and a question. One comment is, with all receipts, scan or take a photocopy, because receipts say, that's the best way to follow. Two, credit unions are the best way of saving money when it comes to initially starting an account versus a corporate account. And third, I need your email,
Yes, sir. I'll make sure everyone has that. But, okay, so I think we're going to take like a 30-second break, switch mics, and then Miss Brienne will come up and do her presentation.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. That was great information that Ryan had. I know it's overwhelming when you're starting a new business, you're in the midst of a new business, so hopefully that's good information to help you. I just introduced myself real quick. So I'm Brienne Norris. I've been a CPA for about 20 years. I work primarily here in Harford County. My office is on Main Street. I'm in Baltimore County a little bit too, but I have clients all over the country. I run our department that focuses really on our clients' accounting needs. So I work a lot with new businesses, startups, helping them do some of the setup that Ryan mentioned, but also getting their accounting system set up, making sure they're doing all the right steps. Because I know once you start a business, the last thing on your mind is, oh, I didn't reconcile my bank account. Like nobody's thinking about accounting. You're thinking about selling your product, providing your service, whatever it may be. So I do work a lot with entrepreneurs, so I know the struggle and there's a lot of information out there. One thing I can want to agree for sure with Ryan on that's really important, I want to reiterate, is having your team set up. I say that exact thing to all of my clients. You know, it doesn't have to be the most expensive accountant. It doesn't need to be the most expensive attorney, but when you're setting up a new business, you want to make sure you have your team of professionals that are guiding you to get things set up correctly. Because it is, you know, when you make a mistake, frequently it ends up costing you more money to try to correct something that was done wrong. And also you're going to have questions. So, you know, you want to have your banker set up. So when you have questions about the banking, you just email them. Your accountant, your attorney, like things are going to come up. So if you have your team of people, I think that's one of the most important things that he said. It's so important just to like know who your professionals are. So that's enough about me. I'll kind of go right into it. Oh, do I have to hit it? Just hit enter. So business entities and tax implications. So Ryan went into pretty good detail about the different entities, but I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper on more of the tax aspects. So we talked about single member LLCs. I didn't even put sole proprietors on here because I feel like if you're going to be a sole proprietor, you should file as an LLC. But as Ryan mentioned, sole proprietors and single member LLCs. So single member LLCs are what we call a disregarded entity. So they are taxed the same way on your tax returns. So on your individual return, there's a schedule called a Schedule C. If you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, you're going to report your income and your expenses on that Schedule C. So the part that I get a lot of questions on, you know, everyone knows that whatever the income might be is subject to regular income tax. But think about it, when you're self-employed, you have to be paying your Social Security, your Medicare. If you were an employee of a company, you pay that through your wages. And then your employer puts a portion in too. So there's two parts of it. When you're self-employed, there's no employer to, you know, pay their part, and also you haven't put your part in. So when you file as a single member LLC or sole proprietor, not only are you paying income tax, but you're also paying the self-employment tax, which sometimes is a piece that people don't plan for. So just something to mention there. S corporations, so as Ryan mentioned, you can set up an LLC and then choose to elect to be taxed as an S corporation. So it's a separate filing. So things to think about when you want to do that. There's an additional fee if you have a tax preparer. So not only do you need to prepare your individual returns, but then you need to have somebody prepare your S corporation return. So it's a complete separate return. Through there, you will get a Form K-1. So the return doesn't pay, the S corporation return doesn't pay any tax at that level. What happens is the return calculates whatever the tax may be, and then allocates the income to each shareholder through a Form K-1. From there, that gets reported on your individual return, where you then pay the tax, and then also you do not pay any self-employment tax through that scenario. So when you set up an S corporation, you're technically now an employee of the business. So you would pay yourself, or Ryan talked about, a reasonable salary. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that because reasonable salary is pretty much like an IRS hot button issue. So depending upon, you really have to look at what your industry is. So I work with a lot of medical professionals who have S corporations, and you know, we have to look at, they're providing different medical services. I can't use that $50,000 you know, average United States income to pay my orthopedic surgeons wages. So we really have to look at, usually by industry, of what it might be a reasonable amount of salary. So through the S corporation, you pay yourself wages through a salary, and then the rest of the income would flow through to your individual tax return, only taxed at the income tax rate. You would only pay self-employment tax on the amount you pay yourself as wages. So I generally, you know, if we're using like the medical professional scenario, I generally think it's beneficial to elect to be taxed as an S corporation. In that scenario, if you're doing medical services, probably, you know, 200,000 or higher, because you have to think about it. There's additional fees. You have to pay somebody to prepare additional return. You have to hire a payroll company, unless you're going to process your payroll yourself, which I wouldn't recommend. In order to see a benefit to be elected as an S corporation, sometimes there's certain income thresholds, so you have to think about before you automatically do that. Next one is C corporation. So as Ryan mentioned, the C corporation is separate legal entity. You're actually going to pay the tax at the C corporation level. I believe it's a flat tax of, I don't also have a lot of C corporation clients. We have a couple, but I haven't seen anybody set up a new C corporation in quite a while. So not a very commonly used organization, primarily because it's not a beneficial tax structure. So you'll pay about 21% of tax at the C corporation level. Then if you distribute profits to the owners, then it's also taxed at the individual income tax level. So that's why we hear, double taxation. Partnership. So Ryan went into a lot of detail about what a partnership is. Very similar tax structure as an S corporation. So the income gets calculated at the partnership level and distributed to partners on a K-1. And if you're active participation in the partnership, then that's also subject to self-employment taxes. So I normally say once you get your entity set up, you start doing your business and working on everything. The next really important piece is to get your accounting system set up. So it doesn't need to be something super complicated. A lot of my small business clients use QuickBooks. It's a very easy to use program. It's web-based, very friendly for non-accountants. So it's a good way to organize all of your expenses. But there's a monthly fee. So just like any other software, there's a fee involved. In the beginning, if you just want to use Excel, that's helpful too. I think you had mentioned back there about the expenses that you incurred before you officially in business. So a lot of times I tell my clients just keep an Excel spreadsheet of what you spent, and then once your accounting system is set up, we'll incorporate it in there either through a loan, like Ryan said, set up a loan to owner for those amounts, or treat it as a contribution equity into the company. So there's a couple different ways we can report it, but it is important to keep track of all of them, because before sometimes you have your business bank account set up, it's like you're so busy buying equipment and this and that you can lose track of it, but you want to make sure that that's all captured in that first year that you're in business. The next part's really important too. So anybody plan on hiring employees or having employees work for their business? Yeah. So you can have two different types of employees. You can pay contractors, so you can pay they wouldn't be employees, they'd be contractors as a 1099, or you can hire employees. In my opinion, it is so worth it to sign up for a payroll company if you're going to have W-2 employees. If you miss making a payroll tax deposit, if you miss filing a quarterly payroll tax return, the penalties are ridiculous. It's a hassle each month to do it, in my opinion, and payroll companies are fairly affordable. So if you start to pay employees, I would recommend. There's a lot of different companies out there, some national ones. We have some local ones in Harford County as well, so different options, but it's definitely worth your money to hire a payroll company to take care of that piece. And the third step, talk to an accountant or a bookkeeper. So depending on what your needs are, you might only need a bookkeeper. You might need somebody just to go in and record your transactions, make sure they're categorized correctly. Somebody familiar with an accounting system and kind of how to report things. Just some of the, I don't have them up there, but some of the benefits of setting up an accounting system, potentially missed tax deductions like we just talked about. If you don't have a business bank account and you have business expenses running through different accounts, if you don't have some sort of system to capture all of that, you can easily miss tax deductions. Accurately track your income and expenses, file correct tax returns to avoid penalties and interest. So a lot of my clients think accounting is just really a way to get your information organized to file a tax return, but really I'm going to move into financial statements. Once you have everything set up and organized, it really can help you look at the numbers of your business, run financial statements, see how you're doing. A lot of clients I know starting out just look at their cash balance, and it's like they run it based on how much cash is in their bank account, but there's so much more involved in financial statements. All right, so let's jump into, any questions? Any questions there? Maybe let me take time to address some of the questions that we had talked about before I jump into financial statements. I know we had a question about Delaware. So you can set up an LLC in Delaware, but if you're doing business in Maryland, You still have to record the income that you are doing if you're, let's say, physically present. So Ryan mentioned the word nexus. I would definitely not, you Google it because you'll be up all night with very exciting information about nexus. But nexus basically means, and each state has their own different nexus meaning. What are the requirements to file a tax return in that state? When is income taxed in that state? That's what nexus means. A couple of the rules are physically present. So if you're physically present in a state, you're soliciting business, you have a warehouse, you have a store, that creates nexus, meaning you do have to report income in that state. If you have an employee, so the world of kind of remote work really changed the nexus world too, because there could be employees working all over the country for a company based in Maryland. So all that being said, it's important, like when you're thinking about where to set up an entity, to really talk about the reason why you might want to set it up in a different state. There could be a lot of different reasons. Remind me, what other questions? I forgot what other. Any other questions you wanted me to go over?
One of the things we talked about was switching over later on to S Corp. Is that a big deal?
Oh, yep, S Corp. Okay, so it is really easy. So it's a form you file. If you want it established for a certain year, you have to file it by March 15th or March 1st of the year you want it established, but it's very easy to do. And then at that point, you would file an S corporation return. But in my opinion, there's got to be enough tax benefit to doing that. Because again, now you have to pay a separate tax return. You're now an employee, so you're going to have to run payroll for yourself, payroll processor. But there is, like generally in certain industries, I can tell you exactly, like if it's a medical professional world, $200,000 or higher usually is when I would say it probably would make sense. $200,000 of income for your business would make sense to switch over to an S corporation. But yeah, I've seen some clients who just want to do it all at once, and they're anticipating large revenue right off the bat, and they just want to get all the organizational things done at the same time. That's great. I have other clients who wait, a couple of years until they're profitable enough to see a tax savings on it.
So when you file to become, if you're an LLC starting, 4 years down the road, you achieve that level after talking with your accountant. Switching over is not a big deal.
Nope, I actually did 2 last year. I did one, he was a medical professional, and actually she was a medical professional, bought a practice in December. Is doing great. So she had 1 year as a single member LLC, and I said, you know what, that's it. 2026, we're doing an S corporation. It's a form 2553. It's a 2-page form.
And the filing fee is a couple $100 or something?
No, there's no filing fee on the S corporation. You just file it with the IRS. Takes a couple months for them to process it, but yeah, no filing fee on that. And it's a paper form. You can't do this one online, so you just have to mail the 2-page paper form in.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a quick question for you. What is your advice for artists? Because I have a couple, and it's a state of Maryland thing, it's nowhere else. When the legislature went and now they're making the tech companies do the taxes and everything, the person is an artist and does website design. They're not technically a tech company. So from when I worked at the IRS and me still talking with my IRS coworkers, they were like, things will just keep rolling along the same because like he's not incorporated or listed as a tech company. He's an artist. He's just doing the graphic content for them. I have a feeling the state of Maryland is going to think differently, but I couldn't give them any advice because I was like, that's you're going to have to find a real professional to answer that.
Yeah, and to be honest.
Could you just summarize what you said?
Oh, yeah. Oh, so the question is, so just recently, Maryland changed their laws on sales tax, and IT companies providing web cloud services, so most of the time services are not taxed for sales tax, but in the last session, IT web services are now subject to sales tax. The question is, does that apply to everybody who's providing like those type of services? So my answer to that is, sometimes there's not a cut and dry answer that you can look at the IRS code or the Maryland state code to see it's a yes or a no. Sometimes it's black or white. You have to look at the facts and circumstances. I would probably pull that exact Maryland code, see exactly what it says, who it includes, but there might be judgment there. But I don't, without looking at, I've never read it word for word on who that includes. I've only seen the broad IT companies who are now subject to it. So I would start by pulling the actual Maryland code and seeing who it specifies. And you might have to take a position. Anytime I take any sort of tax positions that are not clear where I can cite it in a code, you create your documentation. So your position, why do you think you're not subject to it? Because Maryland says that this is hypothetical. Maryland says, artists are exempt in code section, blah, blah, blah. You want to back up what your position is in case you get questioned. That's probably how I would go with that, but I can't give you a specific answer on whether artists would qualify or not.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just wondering, like I said, I worked at the IRS, I had no idea what to tell my artist friends about that one.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes, and sometimes you just have to go with what you know, what you can quantify, and what you can look at, and then from there make reasonable judgment.
Thank you.
So I'm going to jump into financial statements. Feel free to jump in if there's any questions. So once you get your business established, you've set up your accounting system, you're reconciling your accounts monthly, everything's up to date. You are then able to utilize your numbers to really run your business, to grow your business. There's so much information you can get from financial statements. So you put good things into your accounting system, you can get good things out. And the good things are generating financial statements. QuickBooks does a great job of generating the balance sheet, the P&L, cash flow statements, a variety of different statements. But for small businesses just starting out, a balance sheet and a P&L are really important. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see. Yeah, they're super small. So the first one's the profit and loss. So it's important to note that a profit and loss could be run for a period of time. So if you want to see how your business did for the first quarter 2025, you could run it for whatever you want. The first column up at the top is your revenue, expenses, the bottom is your net income. The first column is the period that you chose. You can choose to compare it to last period. So the profit and loss, like a comparative statement, is really helpful the first couple years as you grow, because you can see, how much did I spend on materials last year? Oh wow, I spent way too much than I needed to, but that makes sense because this year I really talked to vendors and tried to get a better price. Or it can identify issues where, I am spending way too much on office supplies. I'm spending way too much on whatever it may be. I'm eating lunch out way too much. My meals expenses is way too high. You can even dig deeper into looking out what industry standards are for your specific industry, like percentages. So you can see what other businesses your size are spending and compare you to them. There's it's called benchmarking. There's benchmarking data out there where you can see how you compare. But that's helpful too as you're first starting out, because sometimes it's hard to know how much should I be spending? Am I spending too much? There's nothing left over at the end of the day and I have nothing to pay myself with. So, it can alert you to issues that might be there, but maybe you couldn't tell because you never had the ability to run a good financial statement. So really you have to have your accounting system set up to be able to benefit from financial statements. The next one's the balance sheet. So that one's important to note that a balance sheet is not for a period of time. A balance sheet is for one day at a time. So you might see the balance sheets dated at 12/31/2025. So a balance sheet is essentially a listing of all of your assets, your receivables, your liabilities, your loans, and your equity. So that's a snapshot at one point in time. But it's helpful for a balance sheet too to be able to compare, this year my cash balance was $75,000. This time last year, I had $125,000. Where did my cash go? And between these two statements, you generally can answer that question. But it also shows you, what your debt is. Is my debt way too high? What are going to be my debt payments for the next year? Do I have enough cash to meet the debt requirements? Is my interest rate too high? I'm paying a ton on interest. Maybe I should go refinance and talk to a couple banks and see if I can get a better rate. So there's a lot of uses to the financial statements, but the part I want to stress is, you can't get to this point unless you are keeping up to date with your accounting, with your financials, with a bookkeeper. And I have a lot of clients too who run their own business, but they also do their own bookkeeping. It's not hard to do it. You easily, an accountant can or bookkeeper can train you on how to get it together. If you're not quite there yet, at the very least, try to keep track of everything in Excel. Let me just see if I have. Oh, one of the things financial statements too is helpful. I know at least in QuickBooks, you can set up a budget. So if you know what your budget might be for the next year, you can set it up in QuickBooks and then you can have one column your budget, run one column your actual. So, budgeting is a really great tool to make sure you're staying on track, meeting revenue goals, but then also, through your accounting system, you can track that side by side to see really how you compared to what you thought you were going to do. I feel like I've gone through, so I'm going to open it up if there's any questions. Yeah.
So when I first started off in my business, when Ryan talked about starting your own, your business checking account and so forth, I was making my purchases through my credit card, just so I was also getting the bonus points.
Mm-hmm.
Your credit card sometimes will get the categories for you when you go to actually where you spend your money.
Yeah.
So that may be a way of creating a document as well. That was an easy way to do it.
Yeah, if you do a lot of your expenses on a credit card, and you're keeping a separate Excel, you can easily use those categories and have them all there instead of going through line by line. That is a really good idea. And that reminds me of another comment that Ryan made that I want to kind of emphasize too, about separating your bank accounts. So I actually had a phone call today with a client, talked about this exact thing. He's a traveling doctor. He is a single member LLC. He's elect to be taxed as an S corporation. And we were talking about, he has a retirement plan too, and I was talking about, what part, or him as an employee, his contribution, what part is the business's, and he just was not getting it, understanding that, like, they're two separate legal entities. I know you're the whole owner of this S corporation, but you're an employee and then there's also a business. And he had one bank account, and I'm like, you've got to change this because you can't have, your wages going into the same account that the business is paying the wages from. The business expenses are kind of like all over in different accounts. So it is very important that if you set up an LLC, officially set up an organization, that you are treating it as two separate entities, you personally, and then the business too. So that's something I actually have conversations with a lot. And it's easy to do, just like Ryan said, go set up your bank account. A lot of times you can get a credit card too, and that's helpful. And it also just keeps track of all your expenses in one place. So it's so easy when you're charging things here and there. It's so easy to miss deductions. So I just want to emphasize that that's a really important step, is to keep things separate, not just for the accounting, but for the liability reasons as well.
So the business I want to start up on that, like a travel hairstylist business, what would you recommend for my LLC to be? And it's just me, like, I don't plan on hiring employees, or like right now, like my future is just focused on getting that started and then letting it just grow from there.
Yeah, I think for sure, if I were in your situation, I would set up an LLC. I would not continue or start operating as a sole proprietor. Like Ryan just went through, it's super easy to set up. I would like to have that separation. And then at that point, so, right off the bat, until you get like your client base, you might not see a benefit right off the bat of electing to be an S corporation. But like we talked about, with the gentleman back there, it's easy to do at any point. So you can change your mind on that. But I think if I were you, I would start with the LLC. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we talked about, you'll report all of your income and your expenses on your individual return on the Schedule C, and pay the tax through there.
Just track like my expenses for products and stuff like that.
Yeah, and maybe, how much time do we have? We have some more time?
I think we have about 20 minutes.
Okay. Maybe I could run into 10 minutes. Okay. Talk about like expenses too. Sometimes a lot of clients ask me, same thing. I just set up an LLC. I'm getting paid through a 1099. Like, what expenses can I deduct? Everybody usually knows in your industry, the supplies. if you're traveling, obviously mileage is going to be a big one for you. Yeah, so keep tracks. There are a lot of apps, like mileage apps, that work really well to try to keep track of that. I don't know how too many people keep in like manual logs in the car anymore, but look at the apps. A home office. So potentially you need a space to take care of business, do your accounting, book appointments. So create a home office. That's a deduction on your individual return as well. So essentially it has to be a separate designated spot in your house according to the IRS. You can't use it for any other purposes. But if you do, then what it does is it takes a percentage of what that square footage is in that office compared to your whole house. And then you essentially can take that percentage of utilities, the internet, or repairs and maintenance. So it takes a portion of those expenses. But that's a good one too if you're self-employed. Yeah.
Is there any conflict to have multiple businesses in the same address?
I haven't run into anything with.
Not that I've
No,
seen
yeah.
either. No.
Mm-mm. I have some clients who are very particular and don't want their business under their home address for the fact that it is a separate entity. They don't want the business address. And I have some, Ryan talked a little bit about resident agents, and I have some who hire resident agents so that everything, and these are ones too, sometimes that's other states, so everything kind of goes to them. But yeah, I haven't encountered anything with, if you have 3 LLCs and it's all the same business address, no issue with that. But back to some of the other business expenses too. So the home office, keep track of any office supplies for your home office. Definitely travel.
Can I add in something real quick?
Yeah.
So I'm going to stand up here just so I can tap into the microphone as well. I'll talk loud up here. But just note too that if you're doing any type of travel work, personal vehicle insurance may not be enough because now you're kind of classifying it for commercial use. Right, so you would definitely want to talk to your insurance agent about classifying your insurance and potentially setting up a lease agreement of you leasing your vehicle from you personally to your business, or retitling it and making it a business vehicle. I had a client actually ask earlier about Section 179. Are you familiar with that? Can you touch on that real quick? Because I think it's super valuable. I take advantage of it. So I think it's a good one to learn real quick.
Yeah, so if you're buying any type of equipment for your business, technically according to the IRS, anything under $2,500 you would just put on your forms as an expense. If you're buying any large value equipment, anything over a car, anything over a car has different, a little bit different depreciation rules. There's some Section 179, but there's limitations there. But say you're buying a $25,000 industrial copier for your business. Technically, you are required to set that up as what we call a fixed asset and depreciate it over the life of the business. But the IRS laws have rules that kind of get renewed every year to enable you to automatically expense it in the year you buy it. So unless you're familiar with tax laws, like if you're doing TurboTax and you're entering your copier for $20,000, they might set it up to depreciate over 5 years, meaning you'd only get the expense deduction for that over the 5 years. But there's Section 179 rules that allow you to take it in the initial year, like you would have to elect to do it. So that's why sometimes it's helpful to talk to a tax professional just for those different things, because that could be a big thing in year one.
So like what my accountant's doing for me, real quick, just to highlight on it. So let's just say, for example, in your company that's registered as an S Corp, at the end of the year, say you had that $70,000 profit, right? That number I gave earlier as an example. But you don't want to pay federal and state income taxes on that additional $70,000. If you go out and buy a vehicle that weighs over 6,000 pounds, meaning it's commercial purposes, which could be an F-250, an Escalade, a Suburban, right? You buy it under your business name, and even if you finance the entire amount of money for $70,000, you can take that depreciation 100% up front year one, and now there's kind of wiping out that $70,000 in profit. Now, you would want to speak to your accountant to go through the details. Does it make sense to do it? But that's a question I get on a regular basis nowadays because a lot of influencers are talking about it. So you want to make sure you're doing it correctly, you're setting it up for your business. But that's kind of like the baseline of what that means. So again, take advantage of it. Remember, this is written for investors, it's written for entrepreneurs, it's written for business owners to take advantage of, because we create the residual economic impact that generates tax revenue. Right? So take advantage of it, talk to your accountant. I guess we have time for about one more question.
Who do I pick? No,
Mine is
we'll do it
super
quick. Oh, go ahead.
So it was kind of back in the address ones, like what if you ever need to change your LLC address and like even if it's like out of state, you have to re-register, pay your fees, or is it a smooth process?
It's fairly easy. You can do it on the
You can
the
file
mer-
an amendment through
yeah.
Business Express. You can change the address.
Okay, that's all.
Do you have a question real quick?
So just to clarify about the vehicles, if your business provides transportation for clients, is it better to have the vehicle in the business under business name
So
and personal?
if you're using, like, that's part of your business, so if you're a cab company or whatever, I would think yes, because then the insurance plays into it as well. You're also going to get the deduction through the business. I do want to note that for business vehicles, there are a lot of other rules as far as like business versus personal use too. So there, around businesses, there's a lot to talk about and could be a lot of different scenarios, but I would generally say that it is more beneficial to buy the vehicle through the business, get the deduction there. Set it up as a business vehicle, have the business insurance, everything's all good there. Yeah, but you do, so when we're talking about vehicles too, it is important to kind of track your personal versus business mileage as well. Is that the app you use? Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a lot of clients, I don't know what app it was, but they use a lot, but that's important too, to track.
You can track your mileage and your expenses as long as you attach all your cards and everything. And so I itemize everything between business and personal.
That works, yeah.
All right, we got 1 minute left, so one more question.
Actually, this is a healthcare question. When you asked the question about the new tax laws, you were right, you want to check the new law. Sometimes laws are hard to understand when you go to the actual tax law. So we want to contact the Maryland's People's Law Library. They break down laws for the native user friendly.
Does anyone want to repeat that? Because I can't hear any of what he's.
Oh, yeah, so for the question about sales tax, say the website again, Maryland Tax.
The Maryland's People's Law Library.
Maryland's People's Law Library is a good resource if you're having trouble interpreting the tax code. You can talk to somebody and maybe ask the specific question.
And a good one for you is to go online to the Maryland Insurance Administration. They're often up here. They generally either come to the MVA or the Joplin or Edgewood libraries, but they will give you all the stuff.
Maryland Insurance Administration too for any questions about insurance.
They lay it all out and let you know what your insurance stuff is.
All right, so I guess we'll get ready to wrap this up. And then final comment for me, I'm so glad Ms. Brianne brought up these examples of financial statements. So just note too that if you are a new business and you intend on seeking financing, whether it's through an investor, a nonprofit lender, government guaranteed lending, SBA, USDA, it is required to have financial projections. And those financial projections are created in the format of a projected profit and loss statement. All right, so even if you don't have hard figures at the moment, your reasonable estimation, right, that's what we're using to create those numbers, right? So what are your projected revenues, expenses, cost of goods sold, net profits, etc. So get familiar with these statements. Banks will require them for any sort of financing. And if you're buying a business, you need to request them from the seller, okay? And they need to be professional looking. Ones that just come through on a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, I sometimes have lenders kick them back and say, bring these back when an accountant's reviewed them. All right, so something handwritten is usually not going to fly. All right, so make sure we're doing them professionally. All right, guys, so we're wrapping up for the evening. Again, my name's Ryan Delgado. It's Miss Brianne. Anything that we can do assist your business further, just let us know. All right, thank you all.